Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to this Logic Pro 10 video tutorial on using track stacks. Track stacks is one of the many new features in Logic 10, one that I sort of just didn't neglected to talk about in my main series, mostly because, well, to be frank, I don't use it, but I definitely see how it is useful. And what track stacks does is it lets you take a whole series of tracks and sort of put them together as a folder, as a unit, as a groupable unit, and then you can sort of move clips around as a group rather than having to do them individually. The other thing you can do is it sort of functions like a summing track, almost like using an aux track as a submix. And by the way, if you missed that video where I talked about aux tracks and routing multiple tracks to them to create a submix or a submaster, I will find a way to make sure that that link is either in the video or down in the video description. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use track stacks in both of its functions. One to create just sort of a group or a folder, and then also to sum. So let's listen to this musical example I've got here. This is actually, believe it or not, this is the intro music to my new Logic. It's my new Logic title animation music. So let's listen to a little bit of this. All right. So up top here, I've got this sort of, I'm going to call it the drop beat or whatever. It has a lot of the wobbly basses and things like that in it. The problem is that this whole sort of section is composed of a bunch of different clips, just little clips. And I'm using a lot of instruments. I'm using Massive a lot. I'm using the EFM1. I'm using ES2, ESX24. So I'm using a lot of different instruments, but I'm sort of putting to get together as one unit. And I want to be able to move this unit around rather than having them sliced up into a bunch of little pieces here. So this is the first function of track stacks. First, I'm going to click on the top track and then the bottom track and hold Shift. While I do that, it's going to select everything out here. It's also going to select all of my tracks here. Then I go to Track, Create Track Stack, and then I'm going to choose a folder stack. And so what this lets us do is it lets us solo, mute, and hide this track, or this track stack. And if you want to view all the individual tracks in the track stack, you just click on the little arrow here, and it opens it up. It even tells you what the name of the track stack is. So right now it's called it Sub 2. I'm going to call this Drop Beat. There we go. All right, the other thing we can do is, yes, we can drag over this whole stack and we can sort of move it around as a unit. I want it to look even more like a unit, almost like the folders did when you right-clicked and you go to folder, pack folder, like we talked about in the main series. I want it to look like that. So I'm going to drag over all these, and I'm going to hit J. And by the way, J is the key command for join per track. And it sort of puts them in something that resembles a folder. However, if we open this up, you'll see that it's several different files that are merged down to one stack. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to change my snap mode to bar. I'm going to change my snap regions to relative value. Really, it's only going to matter whether you use relative or absolute, depending on whether the front end of the clip is right on the bar or off the bar. In my case, it's actually right on the bar, so I'd be fine using absolute, but I'm going to use relative just because. Hold Option, drag this over, put it where you want it to go, let go of the mouse, then let go of Option, and we've made a duplicate of that whole stack of clips there. So it's much easier than having to drag over the little individual clips and maybe accidentally losing one in the process. So there we go. So there's our drop beat. By the way, you can automate these. You can say, if I wanted this one a little bit quieter than the other, you could do that. You can also control the overall volume of these as well. There's a separate fader where you can control the volume of the whole stack. So that's kind of nice. All right. there we go. Let's put the display off. Let's talk about the other function, the summing track stack. What I'm going to do is I want to sort of group together my drums as a summing stack because I want to sort of work with this as a group, but at the same time I want to process all of them as a group. The problem with just using the folder function is that you can't add effects or anything to that track stack, and I don't want to here because I've already got all of my drop beat stuff going into a synths aux track, which already has the Sugar Bytes wow filter on it, some compression, multiband compression on it already. So I don't need those to be summed together so I can process them. But the drums are just going straight to the stereo output. They're not going to an aux track already. So again, I'm gonna do the same thing. Select the top track, hold shift and select the bottom track. Go to track, create track stack, or you can, by the way, if you want to know the key command, it's shift command D. There we go. And we're gonna use a summing stack this time. So the great thing about the summing stack is it's much like sending all of these tracks to a common aux track where you can process them all together. So I'm going to hit create. And this track stack I'm going to call the drums. And again, it gives us sort of like a nice highlighted area here. It shows us the name of the stack. And then I can sort of, there we go, I can minimize it just like we did before. Now, one little thing I've always had an issue with when you're doing this way is, for some reason, it always arms the track stack when you're on it, and I don't know why that is. It's just bothered me. It's nothing really that's not a big deal. You deselect it and it unarms it. It's just something that bothered me. So now I can sort of move my drums as a unit just like we did before. So just bring these over. There we go. And the reason why I did that is I wanted to bring that sort of drop beat back in, just because it sort of had there was sort of a build up at the end of this verse here. Let's go ahead and with these tracks, let's go ahead and create a, there we go. Actually, there's nothing on these tracks. Some of these I can go ahead and delete actually. Let's delete that one, and delete that one. And this one, this little pulsing synth, I'm going to leave off by itself. But then these other tracks, I want to sort of group these into a stack as well. So track, create track stack. I'm going to use a folder stack for this one. There we go. And then these, I'll do the same thing. I'll hit J, duplicate it over, and then duplicate this over. So this really simplifies music arrangement, when you're trying to, just find an easy way to sort of sum things together so they look a little easier on the eyes, but sound exactly the same. So let's just see if this worked out here. Okay, so the arrangement looks fine. Let's deal with our drums stack here. So I'm going to hit Command 2 to open up the mixer. And what it does is it creates a single channel strip for us in the mixer just for the drums. It does the same for the drop beat and then the other stack we created. I'll just call this the synths stack. There we go. But it creates a separate one for us for the drums as well. But the difference is because this is a summing stack, we can now add effects to it. And we can also adjust the pan of it as well. So let me just add a linear phase EQ. I've already got a setting up here. That's just sort of like a mid lift and a low end cut. And then I'm going to throw some compression on here. This is just sort of just to beef up the drum sound a bit. And then we can individually control the volume on that stack as well. All right, so that's track stacks for you. To me, track stacks is all about arrangement, ease of building your arrangement out without having to drag over multiple clips and move multiple clips. It's sort of a way to sort of condense your musical material down to something that's more tangible on a macro level rather than trying to manage your mix on a micro level. So I definitely see it, how it's useful for that function. As a mix function for summing tracks together, I honestly don't use it much. I'm not saying that there is any disadvantage to it. I'm just saying that I grew up working on live sound gear, analog gear, and I learned signal flow by understanding how the wiring was summed together to create, VCA mixes on analog boards and analog live consoles. So it's not something that I want you to think I'm knocking. I definitely think it's really cool. But it's just I use submixes the way I do because of the way I learned, and I find creating aux tracks for submixes just easier for me. Even though technically, creating a track stack is easier to do. It's habit. It's a habit for me, and I do what works. Um, so there isn't any real difference, quality wise. There isn't a difference between really using an aux track for summing as opposed to using a track stack for summing. As far as I know, the signal flow is identical. So you're not gonna, it's not gonna sound better one way or the other. It was just one of those features that a lot of people asked me to cover, and so here I am. I definitely see the merit in it for grouping, like I said, grouping tracks together and moving them as a unit rather than using the old school folder function that was in Logic 9, because you can actually sort of minimize and maximize your track stack right there in the arrange area as opposed to having to open it up in its own folder view like you did back in Logic 9. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.